In Classic Hardcore, there's an add-on called Deathlog, which tracks which mobs are killing the most amount of players. And back in September, I took a screen cap of this list, and in this video, we'll be going over the most dangerous mobs from Classic Hardcore and explaining why they're so deadly. And at number 10, we have the Porcine Entourage. This is one of the 2 pigs which accompanies Princess, which is the actual objective of the quest you're trying to claim. Basically, this is a low-level quest which has you go out and kill this 1 pig. However, she's surrounded by 2 NPCs called the Porcine Entourage, and you cannot pull Princess without also pulling these 2 boars, despite the fact they're all technically neutral mobs. They both also have charge attacks which increase the damage of their next attack, so normally this would cause players some problems if they were pulled alongside any other mob. Fighting 3 of these at once though is nearly a death sentence, unless you group up or just have a much higher level than the group and prepare heavily for the battle. And because most people would probably try to kill the main NPC first, I have to assume the reason the Porcine Entourage has such a high kill count is because they would finish off the player after they killed Princess, or just because there's 2 of them and there's a higher chance they get the finishing blow than Princess did. The quest was so especially deadly that in the Burning Crusade, they removed one of the Entourage pigs, so you'd only have to fight 1 guard instead of 2 of them. And then in Cataclysm, when they retooled the quest, they gave her no bodyguards at all, so you simply just kill Princess when you do the quest. And at number 9, we have the Voidwalker Minion. Now, this one is basically encompassing all Voidwalker minions, but the main cause for the high kill count of the NPC is located in this very deadly cave in Durotar. You have to look for and kill a boss NPC named Gazas, which summons a Voidwalker minion alongside him. Him and his minion are level 14 when everything else in the cave and around it is level 10. Because back in vanilla WoW, the way they would make boss mobs harder was to simply just make them a higher level than everything else. And the Voidwalker minion he summoned was just ridiculously tough. Since the Warlock himself was already a higher level than everything else in the cave, what a lot of players would do is focus everything on him under the assumption the Voidwalker minion would disappear after he dies. And much to the shock of a lot of failed hardcore characters, this is not what happens, and the Voidwalker minion continues to live after its master dies, and has about just as much health and hits about just as hard as he does. So the boss fight requires you to fight 2 NPCs that are both higher levels than everything else in the cave. Additionally, there are a lot of other Warlock NPCs in the cave that also summon Voidwalker minions, which count towards this kill count. Although the main reason for the Voidwalker minion being so high in this list is because of the one summoned specifically by Gazas, which is why they nerfed it later on in the game's history by lowering his level down to 10 with everything else in the zone, and also just removing his ability to summon a Voidwalker minion at all. And at number 8, we have the Stonesplinter Seer. This is a caster humanoid creature in a low level zone that many players would be unprepared for, because it's a lot tougher than anything they would fight in starting zones. You see, this is a creature located in one of the secondary zones that you go into right after the starting zone. So you're still fighting low level mobs, it's just they're a lot tougher than all the introductory mobs you might be used to from the starting zones. And this one in particular has a lightning bolt attack that hits for around 60 damage, which is notable for its level being around levels 15 or so, because everything else in this level range auto attacks for around 15 damage a pop. So each of its lightning bolts hits for around 4 times harder than the average mob at this level. And the Seer does have the ability to spam the lightning bolts, even if most of the time it does not. In addition to it having a very hard hitting spell, it's also located with a whole bunch of other humanoid low level mobs, which run when they're low on health, which make them pull other mobs that come in and finish you off. Generally, humanoid mobs are extra dangerous because they run when they're low on health, and especially if they pull a caster who then starts pelting with lightning bolts as soon as it can. And what makes this mob even more dangerous than normal is the fact that it's located near a cave, inside a cave, and on an island. What this means is that it's very hard to actually run away from this creature if you're ever in trouble and low on health. Generally, caves are just death sentences if they're full of humanoid mobs, because if you don't finish off a mob fast enough, they'll run into other humanoid mobs and pull a whole bunch of creatures, which will probably just kill you, because you can't just run out of the cave without pulling extra mobs on the way out, because it's also located in a low level starting zone with hyper spawns. This means that by the time you're inside the cave, the creatures at the entrance of the cave would probably have respawned already. So unless you camp the entrance of the cave, it's actually incredibly hard to run away if you're ever in trouble while inside a cave, without just running into more mobs that respawn at the entrance. Additionally, if you're on an island, it also makes it hard to run away because you have to swim away, and the Seer can just cast lightning bolts at you as you swim away and kill you anyway. And at number 7, we have Lord Melenas. This is a boss NPC located in the Night Elf starting zone, and it's particularly dangerous for 2 reasons. For one, it's almost always accompanied by 2 imps, and it's incredibly hard to pull the boss without also pulling those 2 extra mobs to fight with it. Additionally, it's also really hard to pull imps one by one to kill them before you kill the boss because it's inside a cave with hyper spawns. So most of the time you're going to be pulling at least one other creature when you pull the boss, which makes it incredibly dangerous because there's 2 reasons this boss is very hard. And the other is that it transforms into a cat form pretty early on after you pull it. You see, with this NPC, they basically just copy-pasted the druid cat form onto this boss mob, and it's incredibly not balanced. I've been leveling a druid for the hardcore challenge, and let me tell you something about cat form. It hits really hard and fast, and nearly cut in half the amount of time it took to kill a singular mob out in the open world when I got it as soon as I hit level 20. And the reason for that is cat form gives you a ton of extra attack power because of its agility conversion, and also just attacks fast with 2 weapons. So you're basically hitting twice as fast and 50% as hard. That them just giving this to a low level mob seems like a recipe for disaster. So once you pull Lord Melenas and he turns into cat form, he's just going to attack you with auto attack damage, hitting 2 times faster than normal and also hitting just as hard as normal. So even if you do somehow manage to pull the boss solo, it's still an incredibly hard challenge at level. But that almost never happens, so it generally pulls with 2 other NPCs, and its large kill count definitely makes sense. And at number 6, we have the Harvest Watcher. This is a low-level mob in another secondary zone like the Stonesplinter Seer, although this one has a little bit of a niche compared to that one, which makes it especially deadly. You see, the Harvest Watcher is generally around level 15, and placed in a lot of areas around level 10 mobs. It's also a mechanical mob, so for a lot of players this will be the first time they encounter a creature which is immune to a lot of their toolkits. The Watcher is immune to pretty much all CC, almost no dots work on it, and Warlocks can't even drain life from it. And since it's a high-level mob interspliced with a whole bunch of low-level mobs, it appears to have a higher aggro radius than normal because a lot of people will just be within the red zone, and then it will chase them down and kill them because it's really hard to run away from it since almost no crowd controls work on it. And most classes don't really have a toolkit to get away from it faster at low levels. And to make matters even worse, there's even a very similar looking mob right next to them most of the time, which is only around level 10. Which players might be fighting and then accidentally pull the nearby Harvest Watcher, which just chases them down and crushes them with crushing blows because they're a higher level than everything else. So the Harvest Watchers are especially dangerous specifically because they're all around level 15 and just placed next to a whole bunch of much lower level minions throughout the zone. And at number 5, we have the Rockjaw Bonesnapper. This is a low level humanoid inside a cave in the dwarf starting zone. And the reason this mob is especially dangerous is because it's one of the first caves that dwarves and gnome players will encounter, with hyper spawns and humanoid mobs that run away when they're low on health. In addition, these ones also stun, so if you pull more than one, you could be chain stunned for a bit, which makes it incredibly hard to actually win a 2-for-1 fight, and also makes it harder to run away if they stun you while you're low on health. Although what really makes this mob more dangerous is the fact that it's a starting zone mob where there's just more players that can encounter these mobs and die to them more easily. A lot of the most deadly mobs are in low level zones for a reason, because there's just more players creating new low-level characters to die to them than in the higher level zones. And the Rockjaw Bonesnappers are also located very close together in their caves, so it's easier to pull more than one by accident, with also all of the same problems that other humanoid cave dangerous creatures have, where it's hard to run away from them because the mobs at the entrance will respawn by the time you go in a little bit. And at number 4, we have the Wendigo. This is another low-level humanoid mob in a cave with hyper spawns, and also located in the dwarf starting zone. However, the Wendigo is an even lower level mob than the previous spawn on this list, even if the Wendigo doesn't actually run when it's low on health like the Rockjaw Bonesnappers do. However, one thing over the Bonesnappers is that the cave the Wendigo is located in is gigantic. It's an incredibly massive underground cave, so there's going to be a lot of people in there with you hunting down the Wendigos, and probably getting lost because of just how big it is. And since it's so big, it makes it even harder to run away if you do ever get into trouble, because there's no way you can get to the end of the cave before the creatures at the entrance have already respawned. I have to assume the Wendigo wouldn't be as dangerous if it wasn't for the fact that the cave it's located in is just so big, or if they weren't all just so packed so close together. And at number 3, we have the Defias Pillager. This is a creature located in Westfall alongside the number 6 on this list, and also the next spot on this list, easily making Westfall the most dangerous place you can level in if you're playing a hardcore character. What makes the Pillager so especially dangerous is the fact that it has a fireball that hits for around 80 damage on average. Now, if you'll remember from the number 8 spot with the Stonesplinter Seer, it had a lightning bolt that hit for 60 damage on average. It was already doing 4 times as much damage as normal. This means that the Defias Pillager's 80 damage fireball is over 5 times the damage that the average mob of this level is auto-attacking for. So it's just a gigantic chunk of damage, where most players with standard level appropriate gear that they get from quests can't really take more than 2 of these between auto attacks before dying. The fireball hits so ridiculously hard for its level that it seems like an obvious oversight, because there's no way it's supposed to be this hard hitting for the levels 12 to 15 range. In fact, I don't know of any other low level mobs that hit as hard as this fireball does. In addition to this, it's located throughout the zone, so there's more chances for it to get kills on players, as it's also located in packs, so a lot of the times it's impossible to pull just one of them. And if only 2 hits from one of these things can kill you, pulling 2 Defias Pillagers at once is basically a death sentence, since the level players don't really have any options for running away at around this level range. And also, almost no classes around this level range besides rogues have an interrupt for the fireball, so they just have to face tank them every time. In fact, Defias Pillagers hit so hard for this fireball that I'm surprised there's anything more deadly than this obviously overtuned low-level creature. And at number 2, we have the Defias Trapper, the 3rd mob from Westfall on this list. The Trappers are located in the same level ranges as the Pillagers, and even located sometimes right next to them. What makes the Trapper deadly is that it has a root and a backstab. What this means is that if you try to run away from the mob, it can do a special attack that hits you for extra damage to your back. Although, funnily enough, this backstab only does around 45 damage, which is about half the damage of a Defias Pillager's fireball. Just to really sell how incredibly powerful that fireball is, because the backstab does hit really hard for its level range too, because it also auto attacks for around only 15 damage. But it's really the root that makes it really dangerous. Because it's a low level humanoid mob, it will run when it's low on health, and it has a chance that the root will coincide with it trying to run away. So it will just run into more mobs and pull them and come back and kill you, while you can't effectively stop it from running away. Or if you're just trying to run away from it, the root might hit you while you're trying to make a run and make it impossible to actually get away. Additionally, if you do try to run away, the backstab does hit incredibly hard, doesn't have a cast time, so that can just be the end of you as well, especially since it has a chance to crit unlike the fireball. Because, fun fact, spells from NPCs in the open world do not have a chance to crit, but physical attacks do. And adding the same problem as the Pillagers, where the Trappers are generally located in bunches next to other humanoid mobs, and you have a recipe of an incredibly dangerous creature that can stop you from chasing it down so it pulls even more mobs, and stop you from running away if you accidentally pull too many of them, and deal extra damage to you if you don't strafe correctly and turn your back to it. At least with the Defias Pillagers, you can run away or LOS it, but the toolkit of the Defias Trapper specifically makes that a lot harder to accomplish, which is probably why it's slightly more dangerous than the previous creature. And finally, at number 1, we have the most dangerous hardcore classic mob, which is the Kobold Miner. This is a low-level humanoid mob located inside a cave with hyperspawns, and it's one of the earliest low-level humanoid mobs inside a cave with hyperspawns that human characters will encounter. And since humans are one of the most played characters in vanilla WoW, it would make sense why the Kobold Miner would have the highest kill count of everything else. It does even have a special ability which will cut your armor in half, which makes them hit especially hard when there's more than one of them, because they'll all be hitting against a lesser armored target. But it's not really the special abilities of the Kobold Miner that make it so dangerous. It's that there's a quest that requires you to specifically go deep into the cave to explore it, which means you're setting yourself up for extra danger on pretty much all classes except rogues who can just stealth in. So you're basically forced to go deep into a humanoid hyperspawn cave with running targets. That it's no wonder it's a meat grinder for human hardcore characters. If you remember how dangerous all the other humanoid hyperspawn caves are from the other entries on this list. So if you want to increase your chances of not dying in a hardcore run, be very, very careful of low-level humanoid mobs inside of caves. Alright, and that's the list. Since I first took the screenshot of the most dangerous creatures, the list has actually changed somewhat, and some of the ones on this list aren't even in the top 10 anymore. So there is a chance we can make another video going over some more incredibly dangerous mobs from classic hardcore.